something were to happen. Today we have a great session prepared for you. We're going to focus on extracurriculars at the undergraduate level. We have a great panel of people who know a lot about this content. So we want to create this opportunity for you to ask questions, interact, and get all of the information that you may require to have a successful application process to the US, okay? So before we get started, I wanna cover a little bit about our agenda. So let's begin with our guests, yeah? We have today Ana Gonzalez from Albertus Magnus College. Thanks so much for being with us, Ana. We have Celeste Giordani from Boise State University. And we have Jennica Heim, our Education USA advisor in Canada, all right? So they will all share different insights and reflections and tips regarding extracurricular activities at the undergraduate level. So make sure that you're paying attention and that you ask good questions. All right, so we will have our little welcome and cover a bit of logistics. Then I'll explain very briefly what is Education USA. And then we'll dive into what are extracurricular activities, okay? And then we'll have a portion for Q&A at the end. We will have Q&A prompting throughout the session, so make sure that you share your thoughts, your insights regarding this topic in the chat. If you're joining us on Facebook, type in your questions and comments in the comment section, okay? So thanks so much for being here again. And before we get started with where you're all joining us from, I want to remind you that Education USA is your official source on US higher education. Okay, so we are a network that is around the world. If you have not connected yet with your Education USA Center, please go to educationusa.state.gov. You can scan that QR code and find your advising center. And if you're already in touch with them, make sure that you communicate your questions, your doubts, so that we can better help you out and better equip you to navigate the process to a successful US higher education journey, all right? So let's see, I wanna ask you all, where are you joining us from? If you're joining on Facebook, again, please type in the questions, but and your answers, but I wanna try this Menti. Yes, we've maybe already tried Menti and I'm hoping it's gonna work. So if you can, please go to menti.com. All right, I'm gonna share the code for the prompting. Give me just a second. We wanna hear where you're joining us from, okay? So if you have a possibility, go to menti.com and type in the country you're joining us from. So for example, I'm joining from Guatemala, maybe you're joining from El Salvador, maybe Canada, maybe Barbados, I don't know. So please, let's see where we're joining from. We have Costa Rica, let's see, Guatemala, there we go. What else is there? More Costa Rica, good. Guatemala, okay, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, cool. Mexico, who else is out there? Well, we clearly have the United States because two of our guests are in the United States, and we have Canada, we have Panama, so Central America, Mexico, very cool. Thanks so much for being with us. Another question I wanna ask you is, what kind of extracurriculars have you done, okay? So if you see well, I hope this works again, in the next slide, yes, I want you to share with us what kinds of activities have you done in the past? Perhaps a sport, perhaps something in the arts, perhaps something else, volunteering, leadership positions. Tell us what you've done as extracurriculars in the past. Okay, there we go, ballet. What else? What else have you all done? Some volleyball, karate, music, swimming, student council, CrossFit, theater. Okay, cool. So some sports, some art activities, volunteering. Okay, Olympiads, maybe science. competition or something like that? Violin? Very cool. Okay. We got plenty of activities there, and that's a very important thing to have that exercise of what have I done, you know, doing that exercise of knowing and having that introspection ability and reflection of what you have done. That is going to be very, very useful in your application process. So now that we've kind of gotten to know each other a little bit, I'm going to move on to our advisor in Canada, Jennica Heim. She's going to share very valuable information and a lot of tips. So please, Jennica, can you take it away?
Yes, thank you so much, Maria Luisa. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It's going to take me just a moment here to get the correct piece up. And let's start from the first slide. All right, can you see that? Excellent, I love it. And make sure you have your chat open because I'm going to be asking people a couple of questions along the way. So my portion of the presentation is really just to talk about what are extracurriculars. It's important to define what they are and what they mean in the context of applying to universities in the United States. So when you break down the word extracurricular, it actually explains a lot of what it means, right? It's anything that's outside of your curriculum or extra to your curriculum. And so basically extracurriculars are things that are not assigned by your school. So it's not classwork and it's not schoolwork, homework. And so usually US universities often will use the term activities rather than extracurriculars because sometimes extracurriculars focuses a lot on maybe more formalized activities, whereas when you say activities, it broadens it even further to maybe some informal activities as well. And I'll tell you more in a moment what I mean by formal and informal activities. I want you to think of extracurriculars this way. How do you spend your time that is not schoolwork? Really what US universities want to learn is they want to account for your time outside of school, whether that's student council, outside of school work or class work. Maybe that's student council president, maybe that's playing soccer, maybe that's swimming. You had a lot of different activities that you had listed, music, theater. So how are you spending your time? And on the activity list, you always want to include anything that takes up a lot of time, anything that you've received awards in, or you've had some sort of leadership position in. And we are going to take a deeper look at exactly how that's set up. We're going to focus on the Common App because more than 900 universities use the Common App. Now, the United States has more than 4,700 accredited institutions. So you can see that not everybody uses the Common App, but many of them will have a similar way to report out activities. When you go into the Common App and you start an account, you can see on the left-hand side, these are all the tabs of information that you complete that goes to every school that you apply to who uses the Common App. And one of those tabs is labeled activities. This is where you put in your extracurriculars. At the top, it describes to you what you can include here. Reporting activities can help colleges better understand your life outside of the classroom. Examples of activities might include something like arts, music, club, community engagement, family responsibilities, hobby sports, work volunteering, or other experiences that have been meaningful to you. And I think that last bullet point's super important because sometimes students think it has to be a specific club or volunteer activity and don't always think about the thing that they spent a lot of time on that was meaningful, but maybe wasn't a club at school. Do you have any activities you wish to report? You should definitely put yes. And if you have any questions throughout, you can see I just put an arrow there. You can view an activities tutorial that'll walk you through this when you go to fill out your Common App, and you can fill up to 10 activities. So for some of you who are very, very involved, I've talked with students before, we've had 20 activities, and it can be challenging to figure out which ones you want to include. But for those of you who think, oh, I don't do a lot, maybe I have one or two, these activities go all the way back to grade 9. So for the younger folks in the group, make sure you're keeping a resume and you're updating it frequently and really paying attention to the different activities you're a part of, because you'll realize like, oh yeah, I did that 2-week volunteer opportunity this summer after grade 9. And oh yeah, I played for that recreational soccer league that I forgot about, or whatever it is. So just make sure you're tracking these things, because you can include all of them. There are 30 options of different categories you can use to categorize your activities. The final category being other club or activity, which means that you can include anything here. I do suggest that you don't label everything as other club activity. The reason that there's these labels is to show at first glance an admissions officer the diversity of things that you're involved in. So I do suggest trying to find a proper label. And I do suggest trying to create a diversity of labels if you have a lot of things in the same vein. For example, if you're doing environmental research, you might see that there's a category that's environmental and a category that's research. Maybe you're also doing environmental volunteering and you're also involved in an environmental club. Maybe you just do the club as environmental, the volunteering, and then research, and then it's 3 different categorized activities, even if they're all kind of part of being interested in the environment. As I mentioned, you can include both formalized or informalized activities. And when I say formal, I mean something that has a membership or you're employed. So for example, if you're on a sports team or you're a community volunteer or doing paid work, maybe you're doing the arts, something like dance or theater, student government. These are all things with very clear positions or very clear membership. Foreign exchange is also something formalized. An exchange program is something that's done through an organization. It's not just travel for the sake of travel. So if you've been on an exchange for some sort of program through the US government or any other government or organization, that's the proper place to put that. And junior ROTC is something that's specific to the United States. But if you have some sort of junior military organization that you're a part of, in Canada, it's called the cadets. Typically, the students will use that category for anything kind of military related. So that's what that one means. When it comes to informal activities, the ones that kind of jump out the most are family responsibilities. So for example, if you don't have a lot of formalized clubs that you're a part of because you need to take care of a younger sibling for 3 hours a day after school, well, that's 15 hours a week, and that's a lot of your time. And it also means that you can't maybe do an after school sport, or you can't stay after school to do a club or something like that. So they want to know, US universities, they want to know if this is something that you have, because that is important. You're contributing to your family, and it shows a level of maturity and responsibility. What they're trying to get from these activities is not just involvement, but also a sense of who you are and what matters to you. If you take part in a lot of religious or cultural activities, some people dedicate their whole weekend, for example, to religious activities. But simply being a member of a congregation doesn't necessarily kind of stand out as a club. But if you're there and you're doing something, then that's something you can include. And then there's tons of things on here that can be kind of formal or informal. Robotics can be something that you can do in a club and do in competitions, but it's also something you can do tinkering in your garage, and you can include either. It doesn't have to just be something that you're in and enrolled in an activity in. That goes for a lot of the activities on here. School spirit, social justice, a lot of these are like things that you might do at school, but it's also stuff you might do outside of school. And it could just be stuff you read on your own for your own interests. Arts is a great example. There's plenty of people who just like to, in their spare time, maybe paint. I saw somebody earlier said they enjoy painting. So that could be something you include. Including hobbies is interesting. Oftentimes people spend maybe an hour, 2 hours a day on a hobby. And in the end, it's the thing that you kind of learn the most about a student through. So let's look at an example in the Common App and how you would fill out this information. So this is where I'm going to ask for you in the chat. I'm going to ask you a question. So get ready to type if your chat's not up. So we're going to use an example type of journalism and publication. You can put up to 50 characters to describe your position or your leadership role. And in this case, we've included senior editor. You get up to 100 characters for organization name. So make sure you give the real name of the organization. And then if it needs to be translated, you could put in parentheses a translation, but it is important to have the real name. So if it's, say, in Spanish, in the parentheses, you could give a translation of what that is. 100 characters is typically enough to maybe include both of those things. So in this case, we're calling it the page school newspaper. Now you see what I've done here is simply writing the page wouldn't be clear what that is, right? Is it a book? Is it a newspaper? Where is it? By including school newspaper, it helps understand that it's an in-school activity and the scope of what every admissions officer knows, kind of the scope of a school newspaper. Now this is where I need your help. I've included the description. I edited and wrote articles for our school newspaper, and you can include up to 150 characters, which is not a lot of characters. So you have to be really smart about what you want to include here. How can what is written here be improved? So I want you to think about, okay, what was already written earlier? What shouldn't we repeat, right? So I edited articles. Well, we already said you were the senior editor. What does the senior editor do but edit and write articles? That's pretty obvious on first glance on this kind of activity. Same as like if your activity is karate and the first thing you say is, I competed in karate. You know, you're repeating what's already there. So with 150 words, you need to be more concise and economize. I also already used the word school newspaper in the page school newspaper, right? So it's repeated. So I'm curious in the chat if you can include what you think would improve this particular sentence. And oh, do we just have the Q&A up, or can everyone include in the chat?
Yeah, they can write. So don't be shy. There's not really wrong answers. So
there isn't wrong answers. There's just answers that can be improved upon, right? So this answer, I mean, is technically a right answer. It's just not super interesting because it doesn't give us new information. So how can we introduce new information? So what you want to do in this space is you want to highlight the achievements that you've had in this position. So maybe you raised a certain amount of money. Maybe, yeah, exactly. So Dealey says, write about the type of articles you edited and why. You could even say what motivates you in this activity, why you enjoy it. You can include, as a senior editor, it's usually a supervisory position. How many people did you supervise? And maybe what was the scope of the distribution of the newspaper? Because sometimes school newspapers are in the local community. Did you also maybe go on local media and give interviews? So think of the ways that you have added your uniqueness to this position, including if there's been any awards related to it. I think like for things like MUN, Model UN, you can include the top awards you've received and kind of the scope of those. Or you can put those in the awards section. So you kind of have to balance in between the two. Exactly, highlight achievements, fabulous. As you move through, you'll see that you'll indicate anything you participated in during the standard grades that are considered high school in the United States. Your schooling may be different, but US universities basically look at the equivalent grade 9 through 12. And then if your school has a grade 13 or you took some sort of gap year, you would use the post-grad as the indicator for that year. You can then indicate if it was during the school year, during the break, or all year, how many hours you spent per week, about how many weeks a year, and that you intend to participate in a similar activity in college. I mean, that's just, if you don't follow, it's not the, there's no lie detector test. If you don't follow it through, that's okay. But if you say, oh, I love the newspaper, I would love to keep doing that in college and university, great. Of course, you don't always know exactly how many hours you spend on things. You just do your best to try to create an average of how much time approximately you spend. Again, we're trying to get an idea of how you're spending your time generally. So I get this question a lot, and I'm sure every Education USA advisor does. What extracurricular should I do? To which case I usually look someone straight in the eye and I said, dance. So no, there's no one specific activity that you have to do. It's more about how you do those activities. It's not about the what, it's about the quality. And so if you're doing a lot of things and you don't like all of them, cut away the things you don't like that much and focus on the things you enjoy. And how can you get more involved? Maybe aim for something that would give you an achievement or award or scholarship. How can you get a leadership role? Maybe you can use the thing you love to give back to your community. I always encourage students to think about, well, what do you like? Are you a teacher? Are you into STEM? Are you an athlete? How can you share that with other people? There's always ways to give back to your community with the things you're good at. Complete or implement a project, seeing it through start to finish. You can just aim for overall enrichment. I know right now in COVID, it's hard to join things. So you can look at, what are the academics I love? How can I study those things more using Coursera courses or other sorts of online opportunities? Create a YouTube channel or a blog to share my knowledge. There's no wrong answers here. Explore these things however you see fit and the way that it interests you. And lastly, I put cool and quirky you, because sometimes people think that they have to narrow themselves in, like, oh, I want to study biology, so my profile should only show that I'm in the science club and I do this STEM activity, and kind of narrow it in. The US universities love a STEM student who also plays the oboe and also does karate and also in their spare time knits. You can include all of this information, and it makes you kind of a more interesting person if you're sharing all the sides of you. I probably took a few more than 10 minutes. I'll go ahead and leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to hand it over to Celeste and her portion of the presentation.
Jennica, that was an incredible overview of extracurriculars in the US. And I really love how you talked about, you shouldn't just focus on what you think US universities want you to know. Like, you really should focus on what your passions are and like what's going to energize you, because you're going to be a better candidate, right? And you're going to have a better experience, I think, in your secondary school and then also in your university. So a little bit of context, my name is Celeste and I work at Boise State University. So we are a mid-sized public institution in the Mountain West of the United States, just about an hour flight from San Francisco or Seattle. I'm really excited to be talking to you all today about extracurriculars. I'll focus more so on what we look for in regards to the scholarship process. And then I'm also going to speak on how you can interact with extracurriculars when you're actually at a US institution, because that's why we focus so much on it in the application process and the scholarship process, is because US universities and community colleges give you the opportunity to really get outside of the classroom and engage with the community, engage with student organizations. So Boise State in particular, we actually do not look at extracurriculars in the admissions process because we focus pretty much solely on academic performance. But extracurriculars do matter. They matter for merit scholarships, and they also matter if you potentially wouldn't academically qualify for admission. So with both merit scholarships and with comprehensive review is what we call it for the application process, both of those are more detailed, and they truly, I think, demonstrate your ability to potentially succeed at a campus. And that's why we want to know more about you, because obviously your transcripts tell you a lot and maybe some test scores tell you a lot, but I also, we want to know about your family responsibilities. We want to know what you're doing outside of, your 8-hour school day or however long you're at school. So you'll find schools like Boise State, maybe they are mid-size or larger public state schools that are less competitive, typically don't look at your extracurriculars unless it's for scholarships. I'll pass it on to Anna after this, and she'll talk a little bit more about how she reviews extracurriculars in the actual application process. But essentially, we want to know as a university how you're going to add value to the campus community, because we're looking for engaged students, and we're looking for students who are curious about things and are passionate about something and have an good attitude for learning more, I guess is the best way to put it. Boise State in particular is really big on getting students outside of the classroom, because of course it matters what you're doing in a lecture hall, right? You're talking with your professors, things like that. But what are you doing outside the classroom? Are you engaging in volunteering? Are you connecting with peers? Those activities make your time, both in high school and in university, a bit more enjoyable and so much more worthwhile, and helping you become a more employable student, right? And a better citizen, I think. So with being involved at universities, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And at Boise State, we call it going beyond the major. So your major is your bachelor's degree that you're studying. But so many US universities and colleges have this same emphasis on this idea of really getting outside the classroom. So why it matters, right? There's a lot of reasons, but I like focusing on connection. So you're obviously choosing the university that you're applying to for a reason. But once you get there, the more you participate, and it could be things that you've already been involved with, or it could be things that you just want to explore, you'll realize very quickly how you're surrounded by people who are passionate about the same things as you. Your campus is going to become smaller the more involved you get, and you're going to just meet new people and feel this connection, even if you're very far from home. Of course, you can explore new interests. Each university in the US has probably more than 150 to 200 student organizations each, whether that is academic clubs or whether that is, a whitewater kayaking club. There's truly so much to get involved in. Of course, you'll meet friends, but it's really also about the experience too. So all that you're getting, right? And Jennica talked about this, like leadership opportunities, things that you're doing are going to add to your resume later. And then, of course, academic success. And I think this also relates to your high school experience too, or your secondary school experience. When you are involved or when you are doing things on the side, it has a positive correlation with your academic success. And that's something to focus on. When you get to campus, there are a lot of things that you can take advantage of that will help you explore your extracurriculars. So we like to focus on campus events because most college campuses have a calendar full of events that range from sporting events, or maybe they are music performances, comedians will come through, spoken word artists, theater productions, you name it, you can find something that you want to go do on the weekend or a weeknight. Usually they're pretty budget friendly, or you can get discounts as a student. And it's really the one time in your life where you're going to be able to take advantage of this event that's right outside your residence hall door. So I definitely encourage you to explore that when you get to campus. And student organization. So if you were super involved in high school, or maybe you weren't involved, but you get to campus and you want to join something, there's going to be opportunity for that. And I highly recommend in your first semester, first year, really taking advantage of getting involved. So like I said, there's academic organizations, you could do, media, you could work at the radio station, recreational activities, student government, whatever you're passionate in. There's likely another person on your university campus that you can connect with, or college campus that you can connect with about this passion. And you don't have to come, and be super involved in high school to find this organization. But if you are and you find the same one, that's really awesome. And then, of course, volunteering. US universities have place a large emphasis on this idea of service. And so if you can focus on that in high school, but then also focus on that when you are at a US college or university, that is going to make your experience that much better. With volunteering, you can do so through a student organization, or maybe it is an alternative spring break, or maybe it is a class that you're participating in that volunteers. All of those opportunities are going to connect you to the community that's around you. You're going to make an impact. And then, of course, you'll be able to network with people that are also passionate about the same things. With continuing extracurriculars, of course, what we sometimes people consider employment or internships, extracurriculars. When you're at a US university, you're able to pursue these types of experiences. So you can do an internship after 1 year of study and something called CPT. And then you can also work on campus. And so working on campus provides you with really, a lot of professional development opportunities, connection to campus, once again, this idea, and really understanding of the US work system. that is pretty much all I have. So I will pass it to Anna, but I hope that you all are empowered to ask us questions after. You have a great group of people here that you can ask questions to, and hopefully this was beneficial for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Celeste. And I'm trying to give you a little clap here. Yeah. I really want to begin by expressing that the extracurricular activities are amazing. And you saw from Ms. Jennica Heim, who provided a wonderful overview of extracurricular activities and how to highlight your involvement as part of your application process. And we just heard from Celeste from Boise State University, the wonderful overview of the value of engagement in college. Today, I have the privilege of coming live from Albertus Magnus College. We are a small private school located in the cosmopolitan heart of New England, 2 hours away from New York, 3 hours away from Boston. I want to just highlight that we're small. Now, the point of my perspective in this brief section of the presentation is really looking at what I look for as applicants highlight their extracurricular involvement in high school, secondary school, and as well the Albertus Magnus College perspective from a small private school. Let's begin with a fun fact. Did you know that 70% of US-based CEOs held an office in a club or organization while in college? This is mind-blowing to me because the top bosses, right, successful individuals were involved in extracurricular activities while in the university. While I don't have the figures, I can only guess that extracurricular engagement began while in high school or secondary school. As an admissions counselor, I love seeing when students highlight their extracurricular involvement, because extracurricular involvement to me tells me that the student is engaged beyond the classroom, beyond the grades. And extracurricular involvement is proven to showcase, or better yet, to grant students skills needed for professional success. For instance, it helps build skills beyond the classroom, leadership abilities. It broadens perspectives. It enhances academic performance. It helps develop critical thinking. And of course, helps with time management. When I review applications, I really value when a student takes the extra time to highlight their involvement, either in a sports team, in community service, or in participation in a club or activity within their high school or secondary school. To me, this gives me an insight to the individual. When I'm reading an application, I don't know the person, right? So I depend highly on that application, on the essay, and any recommendation letters to get an image of the person that I'm hoping to admit to Albertus Magnus College. To me, really, seeing a person that takes that time to mention, hey, I was an editor in my newspaper, or hey, I play the flute, it really grants me the fact that this student, with their education, with their extracurricular activities, will continue to develop at our university the critical thinking skills, interdisciplinary skills, and leadership skills that will make easy the transition from being a scholar to a professional and go out in the world and be phenomenal and make a difference, right? At Albertus Magnus College, another item that we, and part of the reason why we value seeing in the application process extracurricular activity, is that Service and community engagement, or engagement in your university community, is part of our pillars. We find that when a student is engaged in their university community, in their professional community, they are not an island. The community relies on that individual, and the individual relies on the student. Same thing in regards to service and communities and volunteering. When a student gives back, the student is not only receiving information and knowledge, but is taking the time to help and to make a difference. And that's something that we at our small value-based school celebrate. And we want all of our students to be able to do that. As a matter of fact, we do expect all of our students to do at least 3 hours of volunteer service their first year of college. As a last item, when I review applications and see that a student is engaged in student leadership or they hold an office in a given club, we qualify the student, or we encourage the student to apply for additional scholarships. And the student can receive money for their studies based on their community service, on participation in different clubs and engagements. And ultimately, we know that a student who is engaged is going to contribute to the success of the school, is going to absorb the information and the knowledge, and will go forth and in a very near future be part of this 70% of US-based CEOs or global CEOs that held an office in a club or organization while in college. So this is a brief overview as to how Albertus Magnus College encourages applicants to celebrate their achievement and engagement through extracurricular activities, and a little bit of what we hope for our students to, and really push for our students to be engaged while in college. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Anna. Now we'll move on to questions. I think Jennica, Celeste, and Anna shared really important information from different angles and that cover different questions that you may already have. But we have received some questions, and I wanted to begin with Jennica because of time, because I know she has to step out sometime soon. So Jennica, in your opinion, I know you talked a little bit about this, but what's more important, quantity or quality? What do you think?
Quality 100%. Our admissions folks would say the same. Don't join things just to join things. There's no point in that. Some people like that. I've met students who love it. They love trying a bunch of different things, so that's what they do. But only do that if that's something you like to do. Simply joining will create a lot of stress and trying to keep up a lot of activities. Focus on the things that you like, that have quality. It's better to have 3 really important activities to you than 20 that are not important. And even if you have 3 important activities, I guarantee you on summers or at other parts of the year, you might still fill out 10 just from other things that you're involved in at different times over the course of 4 years.
Thank you. And on the same kind of off topic, is it a negative or bad thing to not fill out the 10 spots in the Common App for activities? Is it a bad thing to not have enough activities? How about we ask, oh, well, yeah, Jennica, go ahead.
No, I would say no, and I would love to hear what the other folks have to say. You absolutely don't need to do 10, but I do find it concerning when students only fill out 1 or 2. It looks like they forgot to fill out the section when there's only a couple of activities. Most students, because you're filling, you're in school for a certain amount of hours each week, but then you have all this time after school and on the weekends. If your activity is playing video games for for 100 hours a week, then yeah, maybe it's one activity. But for most people, they have various things that they're involved in, which is why it's important to track, because sometimes we forget how involved we are until when we sit down and have to do it. So I would say, if you are someone who, and again, I know COVID has changed things a lot, so I'm caveating that a lot, but even with COVID, if you're finding yourself bored and watching Netflix for hours and hours and hours, like, think of, what could I do that's more productive, that's going to bring me joy, and I can share things I like with other people, and it's going to be better for your health and for supporting your community or creating something interesting.
Anna, what do you think?
Definitely agree with Jennica, and I also wanted to address Ana Fuentes about video games. At Albertus Magnus College, we actually given a scholarship for students who are engaged in esports. So yes, Ana, video games count as extracurricular, especially if you belong if you belong to a club. And in regards to filling out the 10 spots, I mean, I completely agree with Jennica, but I do get a lot of applications that don't fill out that information. However, some students sometimes upload their resume, and I'm able to attain information from their resume. And sometimes in conversation with the students, they mention that, oh yeah, I am in a club. And then I tell them, why did you not put it in your application, right? However, if they don't fill it out, if they don't fill all the 10 things, it doesn't matter. What Jennica mentioned, quality is more important. And but it is important to definitely to tell us about your extracurricular activities. It gives us an insight into you.
Thank you so much for those answers. I have one maybe for Celeste. So somebody's asking, if I want to apply to a US university, but I'm already in college, so say in Guatemala, for example, do the extracurricular activities I've done in my current institution count as extracurriculars? Or how can this person go about this?
Yeah, so you would likely be considered what we would call a transfer student. And it depends on the institution, right? So Boise State, like I mentioned, we don't evaluate them in the application process, but if you're applying to Albertus Magnus, you could potentially use those extracurriculars when you're applying. And Anna, I think, can talk a little bit more on that, but definitely for scholarships, we would look at, what you did and figuring out if it relates to your potential success at Boise State. And I want to emphasize, like, if you're in this webinar and you're like getting stressed, right, about extracurriculars, I remember what it was like to be applying to universities. Don't stress out. Take an hour and just write down what you're interested in, what you've done over the past few years. And I guarantee you'll likely find an extracurricular that you can write down.
Absolutely. No need to stress out, just need to reflect and be creative. Jennica had to step out, but she wishes everyone the best of luck. So thanks, Jennica, for your participation. We have a couple more questions, so I'll keep them coming. So what about certificates? Do I need to turn in certificates on the activities that I'm declaring I've done? And how do I go, for example, about having done an activity for just a few weeks? Do I talk about it or not? Any advice on this? Maybe Celeste and then Anna?
For the period of just a few weeks, it depends, I think, on how engaged you are in that activity. So if it's like an intensive over the summer that you're involved in, absolutely. But maybe you've only, you did it, but you weren't really into it. You'll potentially have to talk to admissions officers about it. So only talk on it if you can be confident that you are able to articulate the experience well.
So one of the things, at least when I evaluate applications or at Albertus Magnus College, when you mention that you've participated in an activity, it gives me an insight to the student, right? And as I'm evaluating an application, I like to look at it holistically. So let's say a student was not a full A student, didn't get the highest marks, but was actively involved in quality extracurricular engagements. this will give me an opportunity to give special considerations to that student, right? Now, if the student is hoping to attain scholarships for their additional extracurricular activities, let's say esports, I will need a certificate saying, hey, this student participated in an esport, give the student a scholarship. Or for instance, at Albertus, we give scholarships for community service. We do require a certificate or a letter indicating that the student in effect has participated in an activity. And as well, to Celeste's point, totally agree with that. If it's been only for a small period of time, how engaged are you? And what did you gain from that? More than anything, it's not to be involved because, oh, I have to be involved and I have to do. It's what are you gaining from it? How is this empowering you?
Yes, and on that note, that the value that you could bring to the student community in the US by having done this activity or through having participated in this group of people, right? You have to get very critical about that. We have a couple more questions. So one person asks about personal projects, such as creating their own inventions. If they would like to, for example, study engineering, could this count as extracurricular activities? What do you all think?
So we don't have engineering, unfortunately, but I did receive recently an application. A young man developed an app, and he shared as part of his application process this app development and how he's implementing it in his school. I gave him credit for extracurricular because it's not just the creation of the app, but also it's showcasing initiative of the student, it's showcasing engagement in his community, and it's also benefiting his school, right? So I celebrated that. Now, it would be interesting to see what this invention is about and how it's being applied. Celeste, what do you think?
I think that the world is changing very fast, and so are extracurriculars, and admissions officers know that. And we at US institutions want innovators on our campus, and we want to be able to support you in innovating. And so I definitely think if you have a personal project that you're passionate about, go for it in telling the admissions officers.
Awesome, thank you. Somebody asks us about foreign languages. How can I demonstrate self-study in a foreign language as an extracurricular? For example, if somebody, instead of watching a lot of TV, decided to start doing a self-taught course on different platforms that are online on a new language, could this count as an extracurricular? What do you think?
I would see something as an extracurricular. Let's say the student is teaching himself or herself French, right? So that's wonderful self-improvement. If the student were to create the foreign language club or the French club and have activities and events around that language, that would be more of an extracurricular activity. I feel that, and of course, Celeste, I would love your insight, and Maria Luisa as well. But personally, I feel that this very powerful self-study, while it's wonderful and it benefits you, and congratulations on doing that, that's more of additional study. I personally would not consider that extracurricular.
Yeah, I think it's how you frame it too. Like, so once again, for context, we would just be reviewing at Boise State for a merit scholarship, right? So if languages are your hobby and you're passionate about them, then we would consider it something of value that you've done, because you will likely integrate your passion for language in your future career and in your studies. But yeah, I think what Anna said about just it being an extracurricular, it might not be.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I would like to add, for example, studying a language to become a translator for medical communities, for medical trips in different communities. Say in Guatemala, there are more than 20 languages and there aren't that many translators. So maybe if you are kind of practicing a language for that objective and you've spent time, then you could maybe advocate for it being an extracurricular. But otherwise, you have to think about the definition of extracurricular. Being it, what do you do with your free time? You know, do you sit around and watch a lot of TV, or do you try to do something productive for yourself, for your community, for the people around you? And watching TV is okay, don't get me wrong, but we also have to think about how we are forming ourselves, right? On that note, Celeste, let's start with you. Do you think some extracurricular activities are more impactful than others? What do you think?
It's dependent on the student and their situation and dependent on what they've done. I definitely think that, of course, some activities will likely be more impactful for you as a student. But for me, like when I'm reviewing a scholarship application, I do look at the impact that they're making on the community, absolutely, because that's something that we want out of Boise State students. But if it's something that you've maybe done that has only impacted 3 people, I don't know if that's so much different than something that's impacted 20, right? Because you're still making a difference in someone else's life and you're still pulling together this community, and that's what we are looking for. And even something like esports. Esports is an incredible community. And if you are involved in it, you are likely close with peers from around the world. And so that is awesome to see students do as well. And I'll let Anna go next because she can chat about it a little bit more.
And Celeste, I think you gave a wonderful response. The reality is, what I think is of impact might not be what you think is of impact. Jennica made a very good point as to, be you, go into what drives you, what motivates you. Ultimately, I want to be able to celebrate your engagement. And when I read an application, I'm not judging that, oh, so-and-so, and this is true. A kid started a pizza club. So personally, I would be like, okay, so pizza club, that's great. But the reality is this club really creates a wonderful opportunity for people to come together and help the students develop leadership skills, and that added wonderful value, right? So ultimately, I want to be able to non-judgmentally see your engagement. When I read an application, I don't think that something is more impactful than other. It's more about you, the applicant.
Absolutely. And I love that ultimate tip and reminder, right? To be you. That's what we need to think about, to communicate your true essence and who you are, because you have to be genuine, and that will be way easier than having to come up with things that you haven't done. I think if we could kind of wrap up maybe in your own opinions, right? The honor code and trusting applicants. I think that's very, very valuable and important for all of us to keep in mind, that you have to be truthful, right? I don't know if you want to give a few last tips before we wrap it up. Maybe let's start with Anna and then let's go to Celeste.
More than anything, when you are engaged as an extracurricular activity, do something that drives you, that inspires you, because it will help you develop those very important critical thinking skills, leadership skills, broadening perspectives. I, as an admissions counselor, love to see that. And it gives me a deeper insight to you. So go out there, get involved, and be amazing.
Celeste, what about you?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, and I echo what you were just saying about being honest in your application, because the internet exists and it's very easy to find out if you're being, truthful about something, or if students are being truthful about something. So I went, and then also just reiterating what Anna said, be you and focus on the things that you love both in and outside of the classroom, and it'll make your experience that much better. And it'll also demonstrate to admissions officers that you are engaged and you are going to impact the community that you are a part of.
Well, thanks so much for your time. We have shared a few links on the chat box on Zoom and on Facebook. The last resources that we want to leave you with are the Common App brag sheets. These are resources that can help you kind of get those ideas out of your head of what are some of the things that you've done in the past. It's a useful exercise that we encourage you to do. And apart from that, remember that we have a lot of resources on our YouTube channel. You can find it on Education USA Guatemala's YouTube page. We've done many webinars, including last year, but also this year. And I want to thank you so much, Celeste and Anna, for your time, and also Jennica, who's not with us anymore. But I think that the information that you shared and the recommendations are going to be very, very helpful for everyone who was here live and who will watch this as a resource in the future. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. My name is Maria Luisa, and I hope that you stay safe and that you have a great week. And remember that we have many more webinars coming for graduate students and as well as undergraduate students. So stay tuned to our social media, and good luck with everything in your application processes. And yeah, have a great afternoon. Thanks so much.